I've got to tell someone about this dream I had. I'm still calling it that, a dream. I wouldn't know what to call it otherwise. Like a lot of people, I use Uber every once in a while to get around. I live in a big city, cars are expensive, public transit isn't always the best option, yada yada. I've never had any problems with it. For the most part, my drivers have all been friendly and accommodating, or at the very least quiet and respectful, and the handful of times I had a less than ideal interaction, the app support people were understanding and helpful. This isn't about bashing rideshares. I think they're great. I still use them sometimes when I'm out with friends. Two other important details are that I've always slept in just my boxers, no specific reason, just a preference of mine, and that I have this gold chain from my Nana that I never take off except to shower. I know it seems weird to mention those, but I promise this isn't anything weird, it's just relevant. I'm a pre-med student, so I spend a lot of nights in either cramming or exhausted, or both. One of the nights, it was both. I was startled after resting my eyes at my desk for just a second by a notification on my phone. It was a text from an unknown number, just one line.
Your Uber driver is outside.
I was confused because I hadn't used Uber in over a month and I definitely didn't have a reason to be using it that night. I figured it must have been a mistake, but I checked the app anyway just to be safe. Nothing there, just my last ride log from 5 weeks ago. I was sure then that it was just an honest mistake on the driver's part. I texted back saying that they had the wrong number, and I had expected that to be the end of it. It popped up almost immediately after I replied that they were typing. I figured it would just be a quick sorry or something, but they kept typing for a long time, like at least 5 solid minutes. Enough time that I had set my phone down, gone to the bathroom, and come back and they were still typing. When the message finally came through, it was the longest one I think I've ever gotten. I didn't even know it was possible to send a message that long. I couldn't even estimate how many lines it was, but it was just the same thing over and over, this time in all caps.
Your Uber driver is outside. 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 Your Uber driver is outside.
That was a bit freaky. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I mean, that's how kidnapping horror movies start, right? I quickly double-checked that my apartment door was locked before going to my window to look outside. My bedroom window faces the front of my apartment building, so I can see most of the parking lot, but there are some trees right by the entrance to the lobby that make it kind of hard to see the bit of the driveway that pulls right up to the front door. I could see the lights through the trees that might have been headlights, but that could have been anyone, or even just the front door light. Nothing worth getting worked up over. It was probably just a prank text, anyway, and besides, I was on the 11th floor, I told myself. It would really only be a problem if this person could somehow lower my rider rating. I thought about telling off the prankster, even calling them, but both those seemed stupid and not worth it, so I just blocked the number and tried to get back to studying. It was hard to shift my focus back to MCP, PIP, and DIP joints, especially because I had been ready to pass out for like an hour at that point. So after maybe half an hour more, I decided to call it a night and crashed. It's pretty standard for me to fall asleep quick. Normally I'd be out in 5 minutes or less after getting into bed, plugging in my phone and all that. But I didn't even remember hitting the pillow that night. I was out that fast. That's how I remember it, at least. It was like 1 second I was sitting on the edge of my bed, pulling off my socks, and the next I was sitting in that car. I'm still calling it a dream. It was one of the most vivid I've ever had, but I know I don't think it was hallucination or anything like that. What I can't shake, though, is that when I became aware of my surroundings, it felt identical to jerking awake after drifting off at my desk. I was sitting in the back seat, in the middle, which was the first thing that registered as being off in my brain. I'm a tall guy, so I never sit in the middle. The second thing I noticed was that I was alone. It was dark, and the car had one of those taxi divider windows between the front and the back seats, one with one of those little sliding cutouts that was closed, but I could see clearly that there was no one else in the car. Even though there was no driver, it felt like the car was moving. Not weird for a dream. In fact, very tame for a dream. That's what felt so off about it. The fact that it was strange, but not by dream logic standards, and I knew that in the moment. I was fully aware of how unsettlingly calm the whole thing was. I looked out the windows to try and see where I was, but all the windows were dirty, especially around the edges, and what parts weren't dirty were completely fogged up from the inside. That made me realize that I could very faintly see my breath clouding in front of me, but it didn't feel particularly hot or cold in the car. It was comfortably warm. I hate to call it this, but the best way I can think of to describe it would be body temperature. I did what I'm sure a lot of people's first instinct would be when they came across a fogged-up window. I tried to wipe it off with my hand. I had to stretch a bit to reach the window, fighting the resistance of my seatbelt. The glass was slightly cooler to the touch, but when I tried to wipe the condensation away, it filled back in almost immediately. I couldn't see any details of what was outside, just a medium gray, one that didn't really strike me as either shadow or light. When I pulled my hand back, I saw that I had gotten some of the dirt that was vignetting the windows on my palm. It was hard to see much in the dimness, but when I brought it up and squinted at it, I could tell it was something hard and flaky and looked like it had varied from pale greenish yellow to light brown. I had no idea what it was, but it left a terrible feeling, residue on my skin, thin and oily. I recoiled when I saw what looked like little hairs stuck in the grime, each about the size and look of an eyelash, and went to go wipe it off on my pants. I don't know why I expected to be fully clothed, or why I wasn't. I mean, if it was... because it was a dream, there's no reason that I would be wearing what I wore to bed. That had never happened to me in a dream before. Realizing I was just in my boxers was distressing, and not just because I was practically naked in the back of a weird, dirty car. When I looked down at myself, it took my brain a second to register that I couldn't feel the texture of the seat beneath me, and that I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Trying to shift in my seat revealed that I was stuck in place. When I had become aware I was in the car, my hands had been resting in my lap, and I was sitting up straight. My arms, which had only brushed the seat, were free, but everywhere else where my bare skin had contact with the seat from the neck down was stuck. That got me panicked. I struggled, trying to use my arms and what little control I had over my hips to twist myself free, but it was no use. I bent my head to the side to try and see if I was, stitched in or something, and though it was hard to tell in the dimness, it looked like my skin just became part of the seat, barely a noticeable gradient between the brown of my skin and the brown of the leather. I think it was leather. I wish it hadn't been leather. Running my fingers along my sides and my thighs only confirmed it. I was part of the seat. I lost it a bit, squirming and clawing at my sides, trying to break free, but the more I struggled, the sharper the very slight ache in the muscles near the attachments became, and pretty soon my entire back and thighs were burning. I stopped moving, fully scared now, and looked around the car for anything that might help. While I was looking, the cutout in the divider slid open. I didn't see how, but when I looked back at it, it was open, with flakes of that same crust from the window falling down from it to my feet. I still couldn't see anyone in the driver or passenger seats, but it was becoming hard to see up front as the fog crept from the far edges across the divider window. I didn't move the whole time the fog spread to cover the divider. I just watched. I couldn't tell if it actually got warmer or if it just seemed like it should have. It didn't take long for the whole thing to become completely opaque, leaving a weak rectangle of lighter gray coming in from the windshield through the cutout. In some part of my mind, I expected a hand to smack against the fogged divider or eyes to appear in the cutout, but somehow I knew that wouldn't happen. Though I never in a million years could have guessed what did. The next part happened very quickly, probably in the span of maybe 3 or 4 seconds, if that. The entire car began to shake and rumble like it was suddenly going over gravel, and it sounds weird to say, but I could feel it everywhere in the car, not just the vibrations. It was like, for a second, I could feel everything the car felt. Then, with a loud metallic crunch, something shot forward from the dashboard, from the radio, I think something dark, silver, and shiny that was hard to tell exactly what it looked like in the dimness as it slid through the cutout and directly towards my face, buzzing almost like a zipper, and hit me square in the mouth. I don't know what it feels like to have your jaw broken, but it sure as hell felt like how I'd imagine it. The only thing worse than that pain was the viscerally disturbing feeling of that thing, whatever it was, rock hard and ice cold, moving around inside my mouth. Suddenly, I felt like I was falling, that falling feeling that can wake you up from a dead sleep, that instinctual alarm gripping me, only I really was falling. The first thing I saw when I woke up was my bedroom floor rushing up towards my face. I'd fallen straight forward from a seated position on the side of my bed. There's no other way I could have ended up face-planted on the floor with my legs bent the way they were. I had to have been sitting up in the exact spot on my bed that I remembered taking my socks off in. I freaked out a bit then. Thankfully, I didn't break my nose when I hit the floor, but it did hurt like hell, though the pain was unsettlingly familiar and was mostly in my jaw, even though my forehead had taken most of the impact. Still, there was a comfort to being back in my room, moving freely with nothing seeming out of place, though I did check my doors and windows mostly for peace of mind. After taking a few moments to calm down, I was ready to write off the whole thing as a weird nightmare from overworking myself. I went to the bathroom to check on my nose in the mirror, see if I had bruised anything. My jaw was killing me, a bone-deep pain like how it had felt when I had gotten a root canal, so I popped some Advil from my medicine cabinet before checking myself over. My nose was tender, and there was a bit of a bruise starting under my eye. I was trying to think of a way to explain away a black eye that didn't sound as pathetic as I fell out of bed when something on my shoulder caught my attention. I don't own another mirror, so it took some maneuvering in front of the bathroom one with my phone camera to confirm it, but my whole back was completely raw. Not bloody, but slightly darkened and a bit redder, tender to the touch and peeling at the edges like a burn. It looked like a couple of layers of skin were just gone. It had been completely overshadowed by the pain in my jaw up until then, and in comparison it didn't hurt that bad. But now that I was aware of it, the more I moved around, the more it stung. The rawness followed a very predictable pattern along my back and thighs. I was terrified to check my teeth, but I had to know. I put on my phone flashlight and inspected my mouth as closely as I could, worried I would find some teeth broken or missing. I gagged when I recalled the sensation of that thing in my mouth, the coppery, metallic taste of it. It was still so vivid in my mind. At first, though, nothing seemed wrong. Then I realized that no spots along my teeth were catching the light. 5 silver fillings, all gone. It was then that I noticed that my chain was gone too. I did look for it, but you could probably guess at this point that I never found it. I had no idea what to think. I ended up just sitting on the bathroom floor for a while, rubbing aloe on all the spots of my back I could reach, the chill of the tiles against my legs keeping me awake. I was still exhausted. I felt like I hadn't slept at all. But I had to have slept. I had to. I made appointments with my doctor and my dentist the next day for as soon as they could see me. I had no idea what to tell either of them about why. In the end, my doctor chalked up the rawness to a localized allergic reaction to my sheets or clothes and suggested I switch laundry detergents, even though I'd been using the same one on the same sheets and clothes for nearly a year. There was no explanation that me or my dentist could give about my teeth. Eventually, she stopped trying to understand what had happened and booked me a follow-up to have my fillings redone. I probably should have gone to Emerge that night, or at the very least told someone about what had happened. I don't know why I didn't. It was probably because of the text. I don't remember what the original phone number had been, so it could have been a different number from the first one. That's the only thing that makes sense. But in my gut, I feel like it was the same number that somehow got past the block. It was a one-line text message that came in while I was curled up on the bathroom floor. No words. Just 5 star emojis.